going to invite you into your bodies for this conversation. The session is called "What If Your Body Could Coach?" And I think it's helpful to offer a little context as we begin. When I entered the coaching world, I was coming from the corporate space, and all of my success in life and certainly in the workplace up to that point had been very head-centric. If any of you have attended any public school system, just about anywhere in the world, you have experienced the reality that we are really, really good at training people's brains. You know, we teach people about pattern recognition and formulas and process. We don't always attend to everything below here. And the coaching program that I chose to enter was one that was very deliberate about involving the body. And I thought, that'll challenge me. Well, it not only challenged me, it kind of flattened me against the wall. But I was intrigued. I became more acquainted with my body, and I ended up going much, much deeper into the work over time. What I've discovered is that there is a lot here that I've never been trained to pay attention to. Well, at least not up until I got into my 5th decade of life. And I am excited to keep the conversation going with other coaches, introducing them to a much bigger arrangement or array of tools for coaching than just the question you can come up with from here. So let me plant a seed before I go any farther. Farther. I think it's farther in language. In a short time, we're going to be doing a coaching exercise. And in the Zoom space, what I've found works best is to do like a single coaching circle, do kind of a fishbowl exercise. So I will be asking for someone who is willing to step into the space of client with a real concern for a short time. And I'm going to be looking for 3 or 4 coaches to inhabit the coaching circle. So I'm planting the seed now so that when I ask later, some of you can very enthusiastically throw your hands into the air and say, it's me, I want to do it. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a story about David. David was a gentleman who I was mentoring in a coaching program. David had done a couple of observed coaching calls with me already, and he'd gotten some feedback, and he was moving along in the art part of coaching. And one day he showed up, and we were showing up to debrief one of his recordings, but he said, "Oh, before we get into that, Jim, I'm realizing I don't know if I can do this. I think I'm such a failure. I'm really, really bad at coaching." And I'm like, "What's going on, David? Why are you so concerned? What is with this assessment that you can't coach?" He said, "Well, I found I can't be fully present with my clients." He said, "There's just, I'm constantly moving around. I was coaching this client yesterday and my leg kept twitching. And, I couldn't be there for him. I couldn't be present." And I of course, had just listened to a recording of him with another client, and I'm listening to his story. And the question that came up for me was, well, what if that twitching was your body trying to tell you something? What if it was a question that wanted to be asked and you just weren't paying attention to it? So he thought about this a little bit. We ended up debriefing the call. He went off another couple weeks before he sends me his next recording. The next time he showed up, he was a different person. He has decided he really likes this coaching thing, and he has spent the last 2 weeks listening to all the twitches in his body and all the times when something has been vibrating or shaking or twitching or, you know, feeling things in his gut. And he's been using that material and realizing that he actually was being very present. His body was being present to what was going on, not just his head. How many of you use your bodies as an instrument of coaching? Right? Let me invite you right now to consider that the different things you do in your life, parent, child, partner, worker, coach, that every single one of those, you actually bring a body. Sometimes it's a different body. And in this moment, I invite you to think of your coaching body as something that you have on a coat rack in your office where you take calls, okay? So imagine yourself reaching over right now, and I want you to put on your coaching body, okay? So imagine that you're about to face the camera here with a client and put on your coaching body. Okay. So what is different? What did you notice you just did or shifted or became aware of when I asked you to put on your coaching body? Oh, and by the way, I have the chat box open, so you can raise your hand and speak up, or feel free to pop something into the chat box and I'll be following that. Okay? So what did you notice when I asked you to put on your coaching body? Okay. So I felt centered, I shifted in my seat, I sat straight. It became a bit more formal, there's an assessment. Suddenly became more aware about the way I was seated. I wore presence. I had a smile on my face. Awareness of posture, focused, attentive, more conscious of self. Okay, right? Are you feeling that thread? You know, one of the things that I do consciously as part of my coaching is computers tend to pull us forward, even if we're not working on the keyboard. You know, we're focused on that little dot, the dot I'm putting my finger over right now, that little camera thing. And so we tend to lean into it like we're talking to it. And that can end up curling us forward. And so we end up like an animal about to spring on its prey, which is not always the best place to coach from. I'm always aware of uncurling my body and planting my feet flat on the floor, you know? And that's not always the place to coach from, because sometimes you do want to get into a more resolute body, but it's worth paying attention to. Now, what are we going to do with it? Are any of you familiar with the work of any of the big somatic coaches, Amanda Blake or Richard Strozzi Heckler? There is a lot of training and literature available out there that helps us to understand that our brain is not simply, our brain is more than just that gray matter that we're carrying around in our skull. Our whole body is our brain. And our brain is part of the body. Well, we say, well, the brain is where we know things. Yes, but how do we know things? Well, we know them because the body is telling us. We have our external senses: sight, sound, taste, smell, and feeling, right? Okay, so we call those our external senses. we have to get data from different parts of the body to the brain in order to make assessments and come up with questions and to relate to our clients. But there's so much more to the way we can read things from our body. I'm going to ask you all to do a series of movements here. So whether I can see you or not, I invite you to do this right now. So I'm going to ask you right now to raise one of your arms over your head as far as you can. Okay? All right. Now, take it 10% higher. Okay. All right. Now, first, I asked you to raise it as far as you can. You all took it higher after I did that, right? Notice that you have some awareness of where you are. Okay. Now, drop that down. And I invite you to sit back in your chair for a moment and take a breath and allow your body to settle into the chair. Just drop your weight. Okay, feel gravity. Nice. All right, now take your two hands and press them together in front of you. Okay, now take the pressure you're exerting here up by like 200%. Like really push them together, all right? Press them hard and then let them go. Now, what I've just walked you through is what we call your proprioceptive senses. There are things your body knows how to do without your having to think about it. Your sense of where your body is in space and your sense of movement. Have you ever had the experience of walking through a crowded airport terminal where there are thousands of people going in different directions simultaneously and you notice there's never any collisions? Well, rarely any collisions. We don't think about it, but our bodies know how to be in space with other people's bodies. Our sense of movement, our sense of heaviness, when you allowed yourself to drop into the chair, you were accessing your proprioceptive sense of how heavy your body is. When I invite you to ground yourself and you can feel your feet on the ground, you're using that sense. You're not cognitively processing it. Your body knows how to do that. If I invite you to be lighter, you can do that. You know, we can actually defy gravity and imagine ourselves being lighter because our body knows. And then there's also our sense of force and effort. So pressing your hands together or opening a door, shaking hands with someone. These are all examples of how we use our body to exert force and pressure. And we just kind of know how to do it. What happens if you pay attention to that? What happens if, well, and there's one more sense of senses, our interoperceptive senses, which are all our internal monitoring systems. If you've ever had the sense of feeling your heartbeat or noticing your blood flowing in your body, or noticing energy or tightness in your body, those are all your monitoring systems going on. When you feel a tightness in your gut or openness in your heart, those are examples of your body at work telling you something. Most of the time you don't pay attention to it. What if you did? So what do we call it when we just know something? When we just know it, and it's not a cognitive thing. We often call it intuition. That's the name we give it. I have an intuitive sense, right? Or, well, you know, I have this gut feel, we say. We have this gut feel. And the reason that language comes up, that's the way we say it in English anyway, we say a gut feel, is because that's our core, our hara, where much of this processing is happening in the body. Some people will even say that we have one brain up here, that's the gray matter brain, and there's another brain down here in our core. That's our physical brain. Okay. All right, so much for the download. Now, what are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with this? My invitation is to consider how you could use the wisdom of your body in your coaching in a different way. So we're going to do a little demonstration here. We're going to do a little exercise. I planted a seed earlier, and I'm going to reach out now and invite a handful of people to volunteer. So I'm looking for a coach and a client and a few coaches to raise their hand for a quick exercise in coaching. So who've we got? Sunitha?
Yep.
And you're volunteering for what?
For a client.
You're volunteering to be the client, okay. All right, so while we're rounding up the coaches, I invite you to think about, kind of a bite-sized thing you could bring to a short coaching conversation, okay? All right, so we have a client. Now we've got Prasad also volunteered. Let's see, who else? Yusini. So I need at least 3 coaches. So Prasad, you'll be a coach. And who else? Arvind? And it looks like Vijay and who is that?
Mrunal.
Mrunal, okay.
So
Mrunal and...
No, Vijay is saying for a client.
Oh, he did, okay. All right. We've got Prasad, Arvind, and Mrunal.
And there is Vijay Kumar.
Well, Vijay, are you willing to be a coach, Vijay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes.
All right. So what I'm going to ask is that everyone who has not volunteered turn off their cameras, and I'll turn mine off in a minute too. So we want to create the illusion of a private space. Okay. So Sunitha,
Yeah.
you are the client. Prasad, Arvind, Mrunal, and Vijay. Hopefully you all have your cameras on. You are the coaches. So, as you're all looking at the camera, imagine this. So what we're going to do is a little stop action coaching. So in a moment, one of you will begin the coaching conversation as the coach. You can kind of decide among yourselves how you'll do that. So begin how you normally would. I am going to step in several times and interrupt the coaching flow. When I interrupt, I'll ask you to just stop where you are, sit back, take a breath, and I'm going to give you a cue. I'm going to give you a suggestion. And at that point, ask that each of the coaches ask a question from that cue based on what's happening in the coaching conversation, okay? So from wherever you are in that moment, ask a question from that cue, and then Sunitha, as client, is going to listen to those questions, choose one, which might be with the same coach or a different coach, and then continue the conversation. And we'll repeat that cycle a number of times. All right? For the rest of you as observers, I invite you all to sit in the space of coach. So imagine you are also part of this coaching circle. When I offer the cue, I invite you to write down or note the question that comes up for you. What would you ask if you were part of this coaching circle? And of course, you're also going to be hearing other people's juicy questions. I love these kinds of things because I always walk away with a few new questions that I've never thought of before, right? All right, so coaches, are you ready?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes, Jim.
All right, so which of you would like to begin?
I know any of us. That's fine.
You want to?
But you're
Okay,
supposed to start with one coach?
Start with one coach. So one coach, just begin with your client however you normally would. All
okay.
right?
Okay.
So,
Got
all right, so you may
Sure.
begin and I'll go on invisible for a few minutes.
All right. Okay. So, hey, Sunita. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Rin. I'm good. How are you?
Good to see you. Good to meet
Yes.
you in this conversation today.
Yes.
And I hope you are available for this conversation at this time.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Sure. Got that. So we'll begin this conversation right now. I know you're part of this program today, and this conversation is being recorded just for your information, right? And I hope you're okay with that.
Yeah, I'm fine.
So what would you like to discuss today?
Okay. So Arvind, I want to talk about, you hear a lot about just going with the flow, right? People tend to say you just need to go with the flow. And I have embraced this philosophy over the last 2 years in my life to say, I'm just going to go with the flow. And I have seen tremendous benefits out of doing that in terms of just how I manage myself and the situation. But my significant other has a significant problem with that. Where he necessarily doesn't think that's the right approach. So we are having some major sort of conflict in terms of mindsets. And I just want to talk through whether I'm doing it right, whether is this the right thought process and the mindset that I need to have. So I just want to explore that through this conversation.
Okay, got that. And I'm hearing you say that you're looking to explore today. What would that mean for you, that you have explored this, whatever you're sharing?
I guess it's just a sense for me to feel that, yes, it's not going with the flow is not just a reckless exercise that I do, but it's a very deliberate, thoughtful exercise. So I just want to talk through for me to get a sense that I'm doing the right thing.
Okay. And I'm hearing you say right thing. What does the right thing mean there for you as you say that?
I just want to get a sense that whatever actions I'm taking in my situation is a very well thought, deliberate action and not a reckless behavior as my significant other perceives it to be. So it is that sense that I want to get for myself. It's just an assurance and a validation of a thing that I already know.
Okay. And I heard you say well thought, deliberate action, right? And you wanted an assurance for yourself. So what's making you seek an assurance today?
Okay, so I think my spouse has been reading the book by Eckhart Tolle called Power of Now. And I think this topic of surrender and going with the flow has come up in that book. And he was trying to make me understand a different side of going with the flow. What you're doing is wrong. And it has to be a different, like he's perceiving it differently and he's trying to put his ideas into me. And I just got disturbed by it. And I thought, you know what, I just need to explore this because I'm hearing this way too much from him saying what you're doing is wrong. So that's why it's important today to talk.
Okay. Got that. What are you feeling right now as you're sharing all of this?
See, I'm in a very comfortable space with this whole process of how I deal with things. But it disturbs me that my significant other is not. And it is, if it was any other person, I wouldn't be bothered. But because it's my significant other and there is a number of things that are in common in terms of our decision making, there's always a conflict that happens. Barring that, my personal challenges and situation I'm able to go through with this process. But when it comes to combined decision for kids or home and stuff like that is when the conflict happens. And I want to get to a space where it is in harmony, where I'm able to explain and articulate the process I'm going through, with this. And it's not how he perceives it to be reckless. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm hearing you say a lot of things right now. So Sarita, I just need to quickly take care of something. I'm going to ask another coach.
Okay, I'm gonna invite you to pause now.
Yes.
So everybody in the coaching circle, I invite you to just take a breath and sit back. Now, I draw your attention to your feet. So right now, I want you to breathe in all the way down to the ground. Feel the soles of your feet on the ground. Notice your calves and your feet, and bring your attention there. And I invite each of the coaches now to ask a question. What's the next question you would ask in this situation from your feet? Now, Sunita, you're going to listen to the questions. You're going to choose one and then move forward with that coach. Okay?
Okay. Can I go?
Yes, please.
Hi, Sunita.
Hi, Vijay.
I've been listening to the conversations with a rapt attention. And I see that you have used one sentence.
Vijay, what is the question that comes up for you from your feet?
Yes.
Okay.
You said that you have your significant half it has a significant problem with that. And I see that you were smiling at that point of time. And why is it so important that your significant half or your better half should recognize that flow? Is it that he should recognize, or you have a problem with that?
Okay.
That's a question I have.
Okay. Thank you. Mrunal?
Hello, Sunita.
Hi, Mrunal.
Okay. So the question that comes up for me to ask you is, in the situation that you have just described, what do you feel that you are sure of?
Prasad?
Hi, Sunita.
Hi, Prasad.
So my question to you, Sunita, is what is this strong need for you to feel that you should not be in conflict with your husband when he gives you this feedback? Where is that need coming from? That's my question. Thank you.
Ravind.
My question is, Sunita, where would you like to go with this today in this conversation? That's my question.
Good. So now you choose one of those questions, you'll move forward with that coach from this point in the conversation. Okay?
Okay. I think I liked, I want to say Arvind's question because it's like forward looking.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
I want to go with Arvind.
You'll continue. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
So where do you go? Where do you see yourself going with this?
Yeah, where are you going with this in today's conversation?
Okay. Where I'm going is, so Arvind, I've made a couple of, couple of wrong decisions because I went with the process of, just going with my feelings and my, just going with the flow. But the sense of wrong was for the other person, not for me. You know what I mean? So that person felt what I did was wrong, but it was not for me. So where I want to go with this is, I don't know, is there some way I can articulate and tell the other person it's not about right or wrong, but it's about what I felt right at that moment, and to allow me that space to, okay, if I've made a mistake, it's a wrong decision, it's a wrong decision, right? But just allowing that space to own my decisions in a way, and not just try to always prove me that, okay, because you went with the flow, you're wrong. But there are a lot of right things that has happened because I went with the flow. So that's where I want to go to. It's kind of like, how do I get to a place where I can articulate that it's okay, you know, the consequence is something for me to bear, but it feels right for me. Yeah.
Okay. And what is Sunita looking to articulate for herself?
What I want to articulate for myself is that on this path of just going with the flow, there is a lot of inner calmness and easiness within me to face any challenge. And that's because there is that, like Jim was talking about, the intuition. There is an intuitive sense that is guiding me to these paths, whatever the path is. And hence, it feels right for me. And I will continue to do that, regardless of how other people feel. But because this is my husband in question, I want him to feel comfortable with what I'm doing. It's not like I want to be in conflict. But there has to be a way I can articulate that to him, saying, hey, I can own my decisions, but if there is a conflict of interest, let's talk through it. But you don't need to necessarily change my mindset to say what you're doing is wrong. You know what I mean? So I think it's getting into that communication space of, hey, I feel you're doing this, but I feel there could be a different way to do this or whatever. And it shouldn't be a conflict, but a communication or a conversation about whatever he feels and why he feels, and whatever I feel and why I feel, rather than trying to impose his ideas on me.
I'm just wondering, what is Sunita's intuition telling her right now? You mentioned your inner and intuition. What is your intuition telling you?
My intuition is telling me that I need to continue on this path, but I need to bring him along the journey, in the sense that I should be able to articulate the process much better. Because right now his headspace is that it's a reckless way of doing things, as in there is no thought process that is happening. You know, when you say I'm going to do this, he just thinks I'm just in that spur of the moment taking the decision. But what he doesn't necessarily understand is there is a significant thought process that is happening in the background before I arrive at that decision to move forward with something. So I want to articulate that. Probably that's the path. That's intuitively what I feel, because it's important for me, for him to feel okay with that. You know, you can't have a conflict in the house. So intuitively, that's what I'm feeling. I think it's about me discussing this in a much better way to him so that he understands.
Okay.
And give him the space to have the conversation. Yeah.
Okay.
So I invite everybody to just take a breath and sit back for a moment. And now I'm typing the cue into the box as well here. I invite you to draw attention to your hands and your arms. And each of the coaches is going to ask a question from their hands and their arms. What's the question that wants to emerge from there? And why don't you go in reverse order this time? So Arvind, you go first.
What's coming is, Sunita, what will you do once you have articulated this? That's the question that's coming from.
Okay.
Okay. The question I'm getting is what you have not, what you have done in the past. If you had a conversation with your husband in the past where you were able to convince him or articulate, if you can think about one uh, conflict that you were able to easily resolve, what is that thing that you have done differently there and which you are not doing now?
Hi, Sunita. This is Mrinal here.
Yeah, Mrinal.
Okay. So the question that comes to me right now to ask you is, having looked at what's happening currently, what is it that your gut sense tells you where you can start building on that? That's the question.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Smita. Prasad.
Prasad.
Smita, what question you can ask yourself at this point in time for you to get that clear answer with which you can go back to your husband?
Okay. So I'll go with Prasad's question. So what was the question again? What is the sense you're getting with my husband, right?
Yeah. So what is the question that you will ask yourself so that you can go back to your husband with a very clear answer?
Okay, that's a very good question, Prasad, because often what has happened is that there's such a different way of communicating because two people communicate very differently.
Yeah.
And I think I've been reflecting on how can I, sorry, can people go on mute? Yeah, thanks. I was just reflecting on how can I communicate better so that he receives it how I want it to be received. So that's a good question because I have been reflecting on, okay, in what way should I talk to him? Because he's a very analytical, logical, intellectual, sits in his head all the time. How can I, very intuitive, feeling, emotional person, talk to that person and try and make him understand? So what I've thought through is that I need to speak my mind out, as in what I feel is what I need to tell him, because I can't mince my words. So once I am able to articulate that, hey, this is what I feel, that this is what you think, this is how it makes me feel, can we sit and talk about it? Then he's all yours to discuss. So so my approach is that I'm going to have a very open conversation about how I feel about this. What is the process I go through logically? It helps if I explain to the man very logically what is the process I go through, and convince him and buy him into the idea. And if he has any objections to it, really listen to it, why he's saying, what is the intent there. So I think it's clarifying the intent. So that's what I'm going to do with my husband. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. And I could see a lot of energy right now when you were talking about this whole conversation, right?
Yeah.
What made you get that kind of energy when you were talking like that? Right?
The energy is coming from the fact that after being married for 15 years, this is the first year that we are actually conversing to understand, to understand. And I think the coaching has a lot to do with that change that is within me, because I've realized that unless and until you articulate, you talk, you say, people don't know. You can't just keep it in your mind and assume that people know what you're thinking. So that's a big shift that has happened within me. I think he's always been vocal about his feelings, but not me. And that lightness comes from the fact that I now have realized that if I have to be heard, I need to talk. I need to tell people how I feel. So that's where the lightness is coming from. And that's what one thing I've started to very openly do it, because I used to be scared of conflict. So I don't tell people how I feel. You know, I should just keep quiet so that everything is peaceful on the surface. But underneath, I'm the one who's suffering. But right now, it's like I don't care what the other person thinks, but I need to tell how I feel. And my husband started to appreciate that, because now I tell, you know, this is what I feel. So yeah, that's where it's coming from. And I can see a lot of impact on that. It's so beautiful when people really tell what they think and share. Yeah, no matter what they're thinking, sharing, but it's nice that you're just putting it out there in the open.
Yeah. And that actually feels like you're getting into the flow.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt one more time. Invite everyone to sit back and take a breath. And in this moment, I invite everybody on the call to take your hands and place them over your heart. And take the next breath into your heart center. And one more time, ask each of the coaches, beginning with Prasad, to ask the next question from your heart. What is the question that emerges from that space?
So, Sunita, now that you have got this very good clarity, right? What's that one action which you will take now when you go back and talk to your husband?
So I think firstly I need to firstly I need to change my mindset that he's not trying to have a conflict with me or trying to prove me that I'm doing bad or whatever. I think he has a point on why he's coming from that angle. It is just sitting in the presence to say, hey, this man is not here to hurt me or, you know, cause any harm to me. He means good for me. So first is that presence, to say that means really that person's intent is good, not so that I don't get hurt in the process. And then opening up this whole heart to just listen, you know, what is that person saying, and then also creating a safe space for creating that condition and environment for us to talk freely about, okay, you know what, this is what I feel, this is what I feel, and then arriving at a place where both of us feel comfortable to have this conversation. Yes.
Sunita, I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
How were you feeling when your husband was saying that you were reckless? You use this word called reckless. So when he said reckless, you had some feeling that is coming up very strongly, because I can see that you have used that word very strongly. Interesting. So what was going on in your emotional space at that time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that word really brings a lot of anger in me, because I'm anything but reckless. You know, I have handled the home, 2 kids, my job, my husband, everyone for the last 15 years. So it is nothing, a reckless person can't do that, to the point that I take care of every damn thing in the house. So when somebody says you're being reckless, and when that person has been reckless, it angers me. It just brings a lot of anger. So that's why I just can't stand that word.
Okay. Sorry if I can ask that question, because I'm not able to stop. See, normally, Sunita, when other person uses a word and we make a meaning out of that, maybe that he does not mean reckless in the same way that you are understanding.
Yeah.
Did you happen to talk to him about that feeling that you had when he kind of made that statement? Did it happen? And
yeah, to be honest, no, I didn't have that conversation, but I think he realized just now, like a couple of hours back, just looking at my reaction, he sent me a message saying, sorry, I think that came out very wrong. That's not what I meant. But no, I haven't. But when I'm having the conversation, I need to understand what he really means by reckless and backed by facts, if he can.
Excellent. If you can have that question, probably you will understand his feelings and your feelings better. That's exactly what my intention was. I have to tell my intentions as well.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good idea. It's just the coaching angle that I need to bring to my conversation. Yes.
Thank you, Sunita.
Thanks, Vijay.
Okay, Sunita, you seem to, you just like all these questions, right? So in the interest of time, I think we need to wrap it up. So Vijay, as long as you're in the coaching seat right now, could I ask you to just trust the process, trust the wisdom of the client, and take about 90 seconds to close this conversation, okay? So bring this client to completion, and then we'll come back into general conversation. Thank you.
So Sunita, I mean, I was listening to you. You had such a passion and interest in solving and getting back to that harmonious state with your husband. That seems to be very important for you.
Yeah.
So going forward, what is one thing that, based on our conversation today, what is one thing that you will start doing differently that you have not done before?
Okay. One thing, first thing is to talk, to converse, to discuss, not to just do the silent treatment, which I was doing for the last 15 years. It's to articulate that this is what I feel in that moment. Like, just like how kids do, they're angry in that moment, they show their feelings. So it's like, but of course, in a much more, I'm going to do it in a much more adult way. But I think it's important to have the conversation and make the other person realize that whatever you said, it hurt me or it made me feel this way. And this is how I interpreted it, right?
Okay.
I think it's always holding that. I think it's important to have that coach hat all the time when you're talking to even your spouse, because it's so beautiful, because when we can explore what they mean, what they're feeling, it opens up a whole new world of understanding.
Excellent. So there's another thing which probably, if you can think about, you want to explore on this, is how will you know that your husband has understood, has actually going, okay, you have articulated, how do you know that it is successful? So what change that you want to see in your husband towards you, and if you can articulate within yourself, if this change I can see in my husband, I think my conversation, my articulation is success, or some kind of success criteria. What would be that success criteria for you?
I think success criteria would be if he and I both are able to communicate exactly how we feel in an environment where it is safe, where we both don't feel that, oh, I'm going to get a silent treatment for the next 1 week, or we're going to have this disharmony or confusion in the house, but just talking adult to adult, and just finishing. So that's the success criteria. If you are able to just talk it out as adults, and it's not an adult to child relationship with either partner, I think for me that is a success criteria. So I will strive from my set, and I'm also going to tell him and create the space for him to be in that safe space for him to be that as well.
Excellent, Sunita. If you can articulate, if he does this, I think that I am successful. Some kind of that you need to tell him and tell yourself as well, so that there's no. Okay. Thank you so much for the call. Going forward, we'll see more of it.
Thank you. Thank you, all the coaches. Thanks for the questions.
All right. Well, thank you, all of you, for participating in the coaching circle. Right. As I was listening, I was also noticing, some people were actually typing their questions into the box. So Sunita, there's other questions there. If you want to print out that chat box, you can email it to yourself. There's more things for you to ponder in the future.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do now, letting go of the content, of this conversation is invite everyone on the call to consider what came up for you, you know, as clumsy and as interrupted as this coaching space might have felt. What came up for you when I offered those different cues, when you went to your feet or went to your hands or went to your heart for the next question, all right? So I'd love to hear from anyone, and again, you can type it into the chat box, and certainly from the coaches.
Prasad.
Yeah, so Prasad.
I think whenever I did those exercises, you know, grounding myself from my feet, then, you know, asking question from hand and then from the heart, I think the level of presence during that moment was much, much higher compared to what it would have been otherwise, you know, because we're trying to be present in that whole moment. I think that's what I felt from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, because what happens is we tend to move up into here, right? So giving more attention to our body, well, what is presence? Presence is now, and our body is now, right? When we pay attention to our physical self, it helps bring our mind into the now as well, which is lovely. Thank you for pointing that out.
Sure. Jim, I can go next.
Yeah.
So Jim, it was very interesting. The minute the leg came, I had a where question, right?
Yeah.
When the hand came, I had a do-based question. That was very interesting for me to see. And when the heart came, I actually had a who question, not even a feeling question. I was more inclined to learn about this person who's sitting there. And it came from my heart. So a who question came out. I wanted to ask, who is this Sunita, kind of a question in that particular moment. So it was very interesting for me to see that relation actually happening based on the body elements, right? Hands is for doing, leg is for walking or going somewhere. And the heart is actually learning about the person. It was very different. It was,
yeah.
It just popped up as well. I could see that question was already ready, coming up. The minute you call those parts out, the cues out.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for that.
And thank you for that. I want to share a couple things that are coming up at the chat box too. People are saying things like the feet signified more of action, heart more of feelings, seemed more connected to self, which is the point you made, Prasad. Body and mind connected with the questions that were raised, right? You know, there's nothing inherently good or bad about any question. The point I hope you're hearing here or sensing is that from where the question comes is going to flavor the question. Someone else, CN says, when I first heard the cue, I felt I was going to focus on myself. Listening to the effect of the questions on the client, I got the feeling that the questions we asked got the client to move in the direction of the part of the body would lead one towards.
Excellent.
Right? You know, and that is another impact. You know, besides asking a question from our body, sometimes, as in David's case, remember I mentioned David's twitching earlier? You know, a way that he has learned to use his body is that if his leg is twitching, he becomes curious about what's going on in your body right now. My leg's twitching. What's happening with yours? And what he's found is that he actually has a level of empathy, somatic empathy somehow, that he picks up senses from other people. It's not something I possess, but it's something that David possesses. And he's learned that his body is basically saying, get curious about the person's body. So that's another way you can use this perspective. let's see, just a couple of other comments here. Converted feelings and sensations to articulation of those senses with the body parts. There's a little bit of a mirroring effect. Yeah. So anything else? Vijay, sounds like you've got something.
Yes, absolutely. So whenever you said these three different, focus on the three different parts of the body, my immediate attention was to look at Sunita, how her body is moving as you ask us to focus on this. And I could see a definite shift in her movement and expression, especially when it was on heart. And I felt heart was feeling, I realized that I ask a lot of heart related, emotional related questions to my own clients, rather than a different set of questions. I realized that because I was passionate about that. So for the other coach, it was who. For me, it was feelings. So it was emotional side of it. So I could see the definite shift in Sunita's body posture as well and expression as well. Cool. If we can have in-person coaching, that would have been wonderful. But at least what I could see, I could sense that. Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you to all of you. Now we are at the top of the hour, so we have to wrap up. Just as we close, I invite anyone who's got access to their keyboard to pop into the chat box just one thing they are taking away from this conversation. One aha, maybe a sense of an action, an experiment you'll try. Just consider that. And of course, Sunita also has a commitment to action in her relationship as well. So I also want to point out that the link for your CEOs is also in the box over there. So make sure you click on that. So connections between mind and body, real connect between body and asking. The body is always speaking. Lovely. Slow things down and experiment with using parts of the body. A lot of words around awareness. Connecting with yourself. Yes, your body is an instrument of coaching. It is a source of questions. Also paying attention to the client. Coaching client's body resonates, using your body. Lovely, lovely. So, you know, if as a result of attending this conversation, you become even a tiny bit more aware of listening to your body and using it as either a form of resonance or a source of questions in your coaching, then I feel like I'll have had a little impact in the world of coaching today. And thank you, all of you. So I guess over to you, Ash.
Thank you so much, Jim, for this wonderful insight and the wonderful session that we have had today. It was really an eye-opener to see that body can do so much. Yeah, and this was just a glimpse. There is so much of depth into it. Unfortunately, in the interest of time, we'll not be able to take any more questions. But however, if people have questions, they can just post it to us and we will forward it to you. I would like to have especially thank Sunita for volunteering to be a client and being so open and being so candid and being such an authentic client. So thank you, Sunita. We really, really appreciate.
No problem. I trust this tribe.
Yes, thank you. We really, really like that. And thank you, Prasad, Vijay, Brunal, and Arvind for volunteering to be the coach and making this session such a wonderful feast today. So people, I have typed the link for earning CCUs. I type it again. Copy the link, paste it in your browser, and submit the form, but within 24 hours. So thank you, each one of you. If you have any questions, please feel free to write to us, and we will forward it to Jim. Thank you, Jim.
Okay.
It's a joy, Jim. It's a joy to see you. Just see you. That's enough for us. You know. Thank you.
Well,
so
thank
much.
you for that. You've made my day.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Have
Wonderful.
a good night.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.